So for the best assessment of what's going on and what might happen, I'm going to introduce you in a minute to Professor Michael, who has, if you've read the flyer, an amazing history. He's a senior researcher at the Israeli Institute for National Security Studies and the Misgav Institute. I don't know, maybe we're going to hear what the Misgav Institute is, and a visiting professor at the International Centre for Policing and Security University of South Wales, UK. He's written lots of books, lots of articles, and he's a highly respected commentator on this global topic, which affects every minute of our lives. We are very honoured to have you share your time with us this morning, Professor Michael, and I'm not going to take any more of that time up. I'm going to hand over to you and let rip. So thank you again for coming, and ladies and gentlemen, Professor Kobi Michael.
Thank you for having me. It's my pleasure. And I hope that I will be able to create a sort of a logic or an order when it comes to our very brutal neighborhood here in the Middle East. But the bad news are that this very turbulent and brutal neighborhood is very interrelated to all the other neighborhoods all over the globe. And therefore, it is very crucial to understand, first of all, the interrelations between the subsystem of the global system, and particularly to understand what is going here in the Middle East. And as it has been mentioned just minutes ago, things are changing here on a daily basis. But there is a sort of a logic or rationale behind the so-called or the perceived irrationality, okay, of this neighborhood. So, in order to make the point or to base my argument about the global impact, of this neighborhood, I would like to open with a very short video, and then I will make some comments about this video, and I will take you back to October 7th and even a bit before in order to clarify what actually has happened and where we are going through these days. So if you can upload the video, it will be very helpful.
I'm sorry, can you hear me? Failed to share. Soon, I'm just getting a failed to share notice. I've never had that before. Um, we'll try something else then.
Okay.
Failed to share. Stupid.
Do you want me to
Uh,
try to do it from my
uh,
computer?
right. Just a minute. We'll do something else. I'll play it on my player. That's what I'll do, and see if that works. Sorry about this, folks.
It's okay. Technical. This is the stuff, isn't it? This is.
Let me try to do it.
Um, let's
Just allow me to do it, and I will try to do it from my computer.
well, no, let me try first because I've got it here, so I can play it. Um, but I better go into full screen. Oh God. No, if I play it, but I need to share it.
While Robert is doing that, Professor Michael, can you just give us a what? Oh, here we go. It looks as though.
I'll start from the beginning again.
Okay.
Okay.
Well done, Robert. Thank you.
حضارة فرنسا والغرب حضارة كاذبة خاطئة، حضارة إلحاد وكفر، فهم يكرهون دين الله الحق، دين التوحيد. حضارتهم حضارة عهر وفجور وشذوذ، لهذا فهم يحقدون على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم. يا مكرون انت محدث الجهاد نهدم نفسك يا مكرون يا خفي، بكره رح نفتح بريد من المسجد الأقصى. نقول لمكرون عدو الله ورسوله: أبشر يا عدو الله ورسوله بالذي يسوءك، نحن على موعد مع خلافة راشدة على منهج محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم، تتحرك جحافلها بالتكبير والتهليل لاجتياح فرنسا وفتح روما، لتقيم فيها العدل وتنشر النور في جنباتها. قريبا يا مكرون لنزيلن حضارتكم الفاسدة ولنطهرن الأرض من رجس رأسماليتكم. قريبا بإذن الله نحكمكم بعدل الإسلام وحضارته العظيمة، ليدرك أهل أوروبا كم كانوا مخدوعين بالثورة الفرنسية. إن الرد على فرنسا ورئيسها لا يكون إلا بإعلان الجهاد في سبيل الله.
Okay. What actually we saw here happened exactly 3 years before the murderous attack of October 7th. And what we saw here is a group of Hamas activists in Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem, in the Temple Mount. And why this video is important? Because what we see here is actually the state of mind of Hamas as a movement, ideological and religious movement, and its believers. And they are not alone in this regard, because they are part of a much bigger and broader camp or axis here in the Middle East and beyond the Middle East. And actually, this is, in my eyes, a reflection of what Samuel Huntington actually coined in his seminal article and later on in 96 book about the clash of civilizations. This is eventually the basis of my general argument with regard to October 7th attack. And they said it repeatedly since the first beginning, that eventually the war between Israel and Hamas is not a war which is contained or limited to the bilateral level between Israel and Hamas or Israel and the Palestinians. And it is not a war which is contained or limited geographically to the area of the Gaza Strip. From the first beginning, it was a multi-front regional war where Israel found itself in front of 7 and later on even 8 active fronts. It was a war against a very broad camp or axis, which is very well represented in the video that we have just watched. And I would say that even more than that, it was not only a regional war, it was a global war. And I say that it was, in my eyes, the beginning of World War III, not less than that. Not less than that. Because we saw from the first beginning that the superpowers were deeply involved with this war, be it the United States of America with Biden administration, and of course later on with Trump administration, that stood alongside Israel, and then China and Russia who supported Iran and supported the Syrian regime. Therefore, from the first beginning, we found ourselves in a very, I would say, broad and global event. And we are still in the same event because what we saw just recently, days ago in Venezuela, is part of this campaign. It is part of this event because Venezuela was a safe haven for Iran, for Hezbollah, for Hamas, and in the very same time, a country with very well established relations with Russia and China. And it became to be a very significant threat in the backyard of the United States of America. But in the very same time, Venezuela, with all the distance from Israel, was also a threat on the state of Israel and a threat on the stability of the entire region here, because the support that this country provided to Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas. So, in order to understand the motivation and the rationale that guided Hamas to launch the murderous, barbaric attack of October 7th, we have to go back a little further and to understand what actually happened here since the end of 2010. And I assume that you remember that it was what very naive people in the West used to term as the Arab Spring, okay? Another failed comparison to the European terms of the 19th century about the spring of the nation, okay, or the European spring. But the so-called Arab Spring was not an Arab Spring. It was a very dark and cold winter. Actually, it was a sort of an Arab upheaval that changed the entire order that existed in this area for almost a century, since 1916, the Sykes-Picot Agreement between France and Britain. The regional order for almost a century was based on a very, I would say, fundamental brick, which is the national territorial Arab state, be it a kingdom or be it a republic, never a democracy, okay? But these were the fundamental bricks of the regional order. The Arab upheaval eventually collapsed this order, and the new order has been created, and it was based, generally speaking, it was based on four axes or four camps that were fighting each other for hegemony and influence in the broader Middle East. The first axis was the Iranian, the Shiite axis, led, of course, by Iran. The second one was the very radical Islamic axis, the Jihadiyya Salafiyya axis, represented by ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Jabhat al-Nusra. By the way, the leader of Jabhat al-Nusra is the current president of Syria of today, Ahmed al-Jolani. Okay, so there are changes also in this order that I'm trying to describe now. The third axis was the political Islam, the Muslim Brotherhood, that were represented by President Morsi in Egypt, that was elected, but he served only 1 year and then he was toppled down by President Sisi. Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and the AKP of Erdogan in Turkey, which is the Turkish branch or the Turkish representation of the Muslim Brotherhood, which is a global ideological religious movement that was established in Egypt in 1928. And the fourth axis was the Arab Sunni pragmatic countries led by Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and in this camp we can find also the the Gulf countries, Morocco, Jordan, and if you want, also the Palestinian Authority and Israel. Now, for almost a decade, we found ourselves in the Middle East in a very, I would say, brutal, violent struggle between these camps, between these axes for hegemony and influence. And from time to time, we found even some, I would say, some crossings of borders between the axes, between the camps. For example, when in the Iranian axis, we suddenly found, at least since 2017, Hamas. Now, Iran is a Shiite country where Hamas is a Sunni movement, and there is, I would say, a very deep and even brutal adversary between the Islam and the Shia, between the Sunni and the Shia in the Islam. But since 2017, at least, there was a very broad common denominator between Iran and Hamas. And this was, of course, Israel and the idea or the motivation to destroy, to alienate the state of Israel. And they began cooperating, and in a minute I will explain what was the nature, what were the characteristics of this cooperation, and how they were represented in the October 7 attack. So Iran, which was, I would say, the more decisive element in this regional system, worked very hard for 2 decades and even more in order to fortify, to strengthen its capabilities and to be able to reach to the stage of destroying the Zionist project, which means destroying the state of Israel. They declared about it, by the way, publicly. They didn't try to hide it. This was, I would say, the main motivation of the Iranian regime, and Israel was also all the time was put together with America. America as the big Satan and Israel as the small Satan. But the Iranians never intended to destroy the United States of America, at least not in the declarative manner, but they did intend to destroy the state of Israel. And in order to do that, understanding that when it comes to the military level that are not capable to defeat the IDF, they decided to develop the strategy of what we know as the fire ring. What is the idea of the fire ring? The idea is the idea of building, strengthening proxies around the Israeli borders, from the north to the very far east in Yemen, training these proxies, financing these proxies, occupying them with weapons, providing them with intelligence, and supporting them politically and religiously. Most of the proxies, beside Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad, were Shiites, be it Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Shiite militias in South Syria. I would like to remind everybody that until the collapse of Assad regime, Iran eventually controlled very effectively Syria. So they brought Shiite militias, mainly from Eurasia, to Syria, and they used these militias in order to fight the rebels against Assad regime. And in the very same time, they prepared and trained these militias, mainly located in South Syria, to the day that these militias will attack Israel. And they had the Shiite militias in West Iraq, the Houthis in Yemen, and as I mentioned before, Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad as two different proxies, in the Palestinian arena. And the idea was to create this fire ring and to prepare it to the D-Day, when they will be prepared in order to attack Israel simultaneously from all of this front and to collapse the state of Israel. And here Hamas enters to the picture, because what Hamas did since 2017, when it began cooperating and deepening the cooperation with Iran, is to follow the same strategic rationale. The idea of establishing and building and strengthening many fronts around Israel that will be able in the D-Day to be ignited and to attack Israel, and then together with the Iranian fronts that were prepared in advance to attack Israel and to assure the collapse of the state of Israel. And they built this strategy guided by Iran, when Iran provided Hamas with weapons, with intelligence, with military equipment, with military knowledge, with a lot of money, and with training, military training that was taken even on the Iranian soil, because Hamas used a very broad network of tunnels that were just beneath the border between Egypt and the Gaza Strip, which is known as the Philadelphia Corridor. And Hamas militants just left the Gaza Strip. They were smuggled through these tunnels to Egypt, and from Egypt they flew to Iran, and they were trained on the Iranian soil. They were trained also in Syria, in Lebanon, and even in Malaysia. And everything under the hospitality of the Iranian regime. Then we reached to May 21, when we had a violent cycle against Hamas, the guardian of the walls, okay, in the Israeli terminology, and the sword of Jerusalem, or Al-Aqsa sword in the terminology of Hamas. And in this 51 days military campaign, Hamas eventually initiated and did the experiment with regard to its strategy. What happened in May 21? In May 21, Hamas ignited many fronts, actually 5 fronts against Israel, where the center of gravity was the Gaza Strip as a military center of gravity. And they used Jerusalem, or East Jerusalem, or the holy sites in East Jerusalem as the excuse, as the explosive barrel, because they know that Jerusalem is something which is very sensitive and very important to the entire Islamic world, not only to the Palestinians. And if there is a danger to Al-Aqsa Mosque, then they can recruit the entire Islamic world, and they can put themselves as the defenders of the mosque, which is for the Islam the third place, the third important place or sacred place after Mecca and Medina. And they eventually ignited East Jerusalem, and they opened a campaign where the Gaza Strip was, as I said, the center of gravity from the military point of view. Then we had East Jerusalem as the explosive barrel. We had Judea and Samaria. We had South Lebanon, where Hamas built its capacities together with Hezbollah and under the hospitality of Hezbollah. And the 5th front, which according to my understanding was the most dangerous one, was the domestic front inside the state of Israel, the Arab citizens of Israel. I assume that you remember the clashes that we had, the very violent and bloody clashes that we had in May 21 in the mixed cities in Israel, be it Haifa or Lod or Ramle or Beersheba, Jerusalem, of course, and some other places. And when Israel ended this military campaign, the Israeli leaders, be it in the political echelon or in the military echelon, they were very satisfied. They thought that we decided Hamas, that we eventually harmed Hamas in such a severe manner that Hamas will be deterred for many years to come and will not dare to re-attack Israel. I remember that during 21, I think that it was in November 21, I published an article stating that at the end of the day, after May 21, Hamas finds itself in a better strategic position in comparison to the era or to the days before May 21. It was a huge success for Hamas. You know, I deal with the Palestinian issue for more than 3 decades. And I'm very familiar with the Palestinian geography, demography, culture, politics, and you name it. And as a researcher who deals with the Palestinian arena, I always prefer to read what Palestinian leaders and Palestinian activists say in Arabic, not in English. And if you read carefully what they wrote or what they declared, what they said after May 21, and if you understand what is the organizing rationale of Hamas strategy, it wouldn't have been a surprise to understand that they feel that they won the military campaign, that they succeeded in the military campaign. They saw that their strategy and the organizing rationale of their strategy actually has succeeded. And I think that they are right in this regard. And we saw the outcome in October 7, 23, because they felt that they are much more prepared in October 23, 2 years after the event of May 21. They were very well coordinated with the Iranians and with Hezbollah. Although Iran and Hezbollah were surprised from the timing, they were not surprised from the idea or from the motivation of launching such an attack. I mean, Iran was in the training and the preparations towards this attack. But Yahya Sinwar, that was very cautious, was afraid that if he will put Iran and Hezbollah in the picture with regard to the date of the attack, then there will be a leak to the Israeli intelligence and the IDF will be able to prevent this attack. But in the very same time, Yahya Sinwar was totally sure that once he will launch this attack, Iran and Hezbollah will join Hamas. And what was the idea of Yahya Sinwar? The idea was to launch the attack from the Gaza Strip. This will be interpreted or will be understood as a sign from God, okay? And all the other fronts that Hamas has prepared for years, that I have mentioned before, will be immediately ignited and they will join Hamas in this attack. Israel will be attacked from the 5 fronts that Hamas has already prepared, and then Hezbollah will join from the north, and Iran will operate or will ignite the firing, okay, which is the outer cycle, and I mean Syria, Iraq, the Houthis, and Hezbollah, of course. And then Israel will not be able to stand such a scale of attack, and this will be the first, or this will be the beginning of the end of the Zionist project. This was eventually the the thought of Sinwar. This was the ideology of Sinwar. And when people, I remember when I said it in the first days after the attack, people were telling me, what are you talking about? Do you believe that Yahya Sinwar believed that by attacking Israel with 3,000 Nukhba, which is the commando unit of Hamas, by attacking Israel, by 3,000 militants of the Nukhba, he will be able to collapse the state of Israel? And I told them, no. First of all, you have to understand, and this is the importance of the video that we saw at the first beginning, okay? We have to understand the psyche, the mentality of these people. I mean, the depth of their religious belief. And Yahya Sinwar is a very religious man, or was a very religious man, okay? And he believed that at the end of the day, it will not be ended with 3,000 militants of the Nukhba. He was sure that at the end, the entire Muslim world will join Hamas. He perceived himself as the modern Salah ad-Din. He will be in the front. He will be the initiator. But everybody from the Muslim world will join Hamas, and eventually Israel will be collapsed. And by the way, Hamas activists and Hamas leaders, after the 2 years and more of war against Hamas, and after the destruction that we see there, and after the very decisive victory, military victory of Israel against Hamas and Hezbollah and even Iran and the Houthis and the Shiite militias in Syria, they still believe that they won the war. I mean, this last war, and they still believe that they are capable to collapse the state of Israel. And we must understand that. But in their eyes, we have to remember that Hamas is the Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is not a national movement. The Muslim Brotherhood is a global movement. And the end state of the Muslim Brotherhood is eventually to Islamize the entire world. They have the patience, okay, and they know that it will not occur in a day, a week, or a month, even not in a decade. But they prepare themselves, and they do what they do in the entire world. And we see what is going there in West Europe. By the way, we see what is going there in the United States and in Australia as well. They build their capacities. They build communities. They use all the platforms that democracies can provide them, okay? And under the umbrella of freedom of speech and freedom of organization, and under the very broad umbrella of democracy, generally speaking, they build the capacities in order to destroy this democracy. They do not intend to be embedded in this democracy, okay? I mean the collective as a whole. It doesn't mean that there are no individuals among them that think differently. But as a political scientist, I have no interest in individuals. I have interest in the collective, and in the collective behavior, in the collective psychological infrastructure. And when it comes to the collective psychological infrastructure, or the collective psyche of the Muslim communities in the West, this is what they think, this is what they want. They do not intend to become Brits or French or something else. They intend to use Britain or France or Belgium or any other place in order to Islamize these countries, not less than that. Now, it is true that Hamas has also a national component in its ideology, but it is much less important than the global Islamic component of their ideology. Now, Hamas is supported mainly by Qatar and Turkey. Okay, and the problem that I see these days is these both countries are very high respected, even admired, I would say, by President Trump. And the idea that President Trump pressures Israel to have Qatar and Turkey as part of the so-called ISF, the International Stabilization Force that has not been established yet, is a very bad signal, at least in my eyes, for Israel. And I think that in this regard, President Trump, as well as many other American presidents and American administrations, does not understand, at least does not understand in depth, the essence of this neighborhood, the essence of the political Islam. He believes that Turkey and Qatar will be able and will be willing to dismantle Hamas and to demilitarize the Gaza Strip. By the way, two conditions that he himself put in his plan. But these two countries have no will to dismantle Hamas. On the contrary, they have a very strong will to keep Hamas as a very influential player in the Palestinian arena and even beyond. They don't see Hamas, as well as Hamas doesn't see itself, as a partner of Fatah or the Palestinian Authority. They see themselves as a replacement for Fatah and a replacement for the Palestinian Authority. Their end state, at the end of the day, is to gain full control over the entire Palestinian system, which means the Palestinian Authority, which is an outcome of the Oslo process, and the PLO. Now they are not represented, they are not members of the PLO, but they demand to be represented in the PLO. And Turkey and Qatar are willing to help Hamas to reach to these end states. And this is a very destabilizing factor here in the region, here in the neighborhood. And therefore, I think that the war cannot be ended before Hamas will be dismantled and will not remain anymore as a sort of an effective sovereign in the Gaza Strip, even if it is only in part of the Gaza Strip as today, because the Gaza Strip of today is divided to west. It is divided by the yellow line, to the west, which is controlled by Hamas, and to the east, which is controlled by the IDF. But what is going there in the west part of the Gaza Strip is that Hamas reconstitutes itself governmentally and militarily. And if Hamas will not be dismantled, and I'm telling you that there is no an entity from edge to edge in the entire globe, maybe beside Turkey, that is willing and capable to dismantle Hamas. Beside the IDF. The IDF is the only entity that has the will and the capacity to destroy Hamas, to dismantle Hamas and to demilitarize the Gaza Strip. These two conditions are very necessary conditions in order to realize President Trump's plan, the 20 points plan, okay, that was backed by the UN Resolution 2803. Without dismantling Hamas, nothing will happen there. And you can see and you can hear that all the candidates for participating in the ISF are stating repeatedly that they will not send even a single troop to the ISF as long as Hamas is armed in the Gaza Strip, and they are not, and they do not intend to fight Hamas and to dismantle Hamas. Only Turkey said that they are willing to join to the ISF under the current circumstances, under the current conditions, and they know perfectly why, because they know that if they will be the first to join the ISF, they will be able to influence the ISF all along the way. And this is, of course, something that Israel cannot accept. And by the way, if you are asking me, I think that at the end of the day, this might be a very good reason for a very severe friction and collision between Israel and the American administration, because for Israel is a very, very, I would say, shiny red line. Israel cannot have Turkey. We already have Turkey in Syria. Israel cannot have Turkey in the Gaza Strip. And we have to understand when it comes to Turkey, Turkey now replaces, in a sense, Iran, because Iran weakened dramatically because of Israel and due to the domestic reasons. It still has hegemonic aspirations in the broader Middle East, but Turkey, led by Erdogan, has very significant hegemonic aspirations in the Middle East and beyond the Middle East, by the way, in Africa as well. And we see the Turkish presence in Africa, and we see what was the Turkish reaction to the Israeli recognition in Somaliland, okay? Because Turkey works and there is a Turkish presence in Somalia, the country that Somaliland actually divided itself from. And when it comes to the Turkish aspirations, one of the main obstacles that they see in front of their eyes is Israel. And therefore, they will do their utmost efforts in order to minimize the maneuver space that Israel has. They will do whatever they can in order to weaken Israel. And their strategic idea is actually to close Israel from two sides, from the north, from Syria, and from the south, from the Gaza Strip. Because everybody understands that once there will be Turkish troops on the ground, Turkish boots on the ground in the Gaza Strip, Israel will be very limited when it comes to its retaliation activities against Hamas violations in the Gaza Strip. Because if Israel will retaliate and will kill a Turkish soldier, then we are in a very big problem vis-a-vis the Turks. And the Turks understand it very well. Israel understands it very well. I'm not sure that President Trump understands it pretty well. And if he understands it pretty well, he has some other interests that are more important for him than the very crucial security interests of the State of Israel. Now, what is important to understand is what eventually was created here in the broader Middle East following the attack of October 7th. Because Israel, that was totally surprised from this attack, and this is a collapse, I would say, of the entire Israeli system in the intelligence level, in the operational level, and in the political level when it comes, or the conceptual level, okay, when it comes to the policy, to the strategy of the political echelon vis-a-vis Hamas. We tried to enforce our logic, a very Western logic, on Hamas logic. And we thought that Hamas goes through a very significant institutionalization process in the Gaza Strip as a sovereign power, and therefore it becomes much more responsible and reliable and accountable, and Hamas eventually seeks to improve the humanitarian condition in the Gaza Strip, and Hamas seeks to improve the economic situation in the Gaza Strip. And therefore, if Israel will provide Hamas with capacities and with opportunities to improve the economy in the Gaza Strip, then Hamas will have some very crucial assets to lose, and it will be deterred. This, generally speaking, was the conception, okay? It was a wrong conception. It was a wrong conception because Hamas doesn't care about its people, and we see that Hamas is willing to sacrifice their people. And I remember Ismail Haniyeh and Khaled Mash'al and Yahya Sinwar during the first months of the war, when dozens of thousands of Palestinians were already killed. By the way, at least 40 to 50% of them are militants of Hamas and the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and some other militant fronts. But dozens of thousands of Palestinians were already killed, and they say, we have no problem with that. We are ready to sacrifice more 100,000 Palestinians in order to realize the objectives of our war. And they had no problems to use their own people as human shields. When it comes to the unbelievable network of tunnels, okay, more than 700 kilometers of tunnels that were digged beneath almost every house and every infrastructure and civilian facility in the Gaza Strip, be it hospital, be it a clinic, be it a school, a mosque, even cemeteries. You know, all the Gaza Strip is digged. And when people, mainly critics against Israel in the West, are complaining about disproportionality and the scale of destruction in the Gaza Strip, they do not understand, do not know, or do not want to know why so many buildings were destructed, collapsed, destroyed. Because it is not because Israel just bombed buildings. It is because Israel bombed tunnels. And when you destroy tunnels by explosives, and this tunnel is connected to buildings, then the buildings will collapse together with the tunnel. And we saw that Hamas had no problem to use hospitals as compounds, okay, of Hamas. They didn't hesitate to use hospitals in order to launch rockets from the hospitals themselves. And you know, even more than that, we are talking about dozens of hospitals in the Gaza Strip. Most of the managers of the hospitals are Hamas militants. The managers of the hospitals are Hamas militants. So,
Kobi,
yes,
Professor, what you're saying is almost too much for us to take in, and it's excuse me, it's provoked some interesting comments in the chat. Is this a good time to take those comments, or do you want to create a sort of a grand finale to your argument?
I'm not sure about grand finale, but a more modest finale. Okay.
Well, it's
I would say
powerful.
that the Israeli response to the October 7 attack eventually created a huge shift in the entire composition or architecture of the broader Middle East. Israel collapsed Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Unfortunately, we haven't accomplished the mission yet, and we have to accomplish the mission in the Gaza Strip. But Hamas is not a threat like it used to be until October 7th. Israel harmed severely Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the immediate outcome was the collapse of the Assad regime. Israel weakened dramatically and humiliated Iran in a way that weakened Iran even vis-a-vis its own proxies. Israel heated severely the Houthis in Yemen, and eventually Israel controls now the southern part of the Golan, the Syrian Golan, what we see today, and I think when it comes to President Trump's plan, is a direct, I would say, result of the Israeli operations in the last 2 years in the broader Middle East, and I think that the impact goes even beyond the broader Middle East, and it reached to Europe, to the United States, and to Australia, and unfortunately, it strengthened the very bizarre green-red alliance between the very radical Islam and the progressives in the West. that are very critical when it comes to Israel. And they, of course, find Israel and the Jews as the main source of or reason for the problems of the entire world. But I think that this is the beginning of the end of this phenomenon in the free world as well. This is the last moment, I would say, for the free world to become sober, to wake up, and to change the reality on the ground, because otherwise the West will be conquered by the radical Islam. And when it will be conquered by the radical Islam, the progressives that now are cooperating with the radical Islam will be conquered as well by their partners in this bizarre alliance. And just a last sentence in order to conclude, I would say that what we saw in the last 2 years and more is not less than a clash of civilizations where Israel stood fiercely as the only, I would say, and the last fourth of democracy and freedom here in the Middle East against the barbarism invasion to Israel, but in the very same time against the barbarism invasion to the West Wall. And if this fourth will collapse, if Israel will fail, if Israel will not be able to reach to a very decisive victory, be it against Hamas, Hezbollah, or Iran, with the Americans, without the Americans, I think that all the gates of Europe, the United States, and Australia will be broken open, and we will find this radical Islam in its full power in the streets of London, Berlin, and Manhattan, and even Sydney.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. While we're processing that, and there's a lot to take in, you gave us such a concentrated talk. I'm going to mention next week's speaker, and then we'll take the questions and the comments that are in the chat box. So next week we have Alessandro Bucci from Living Memory to Living Archive, the Birth of Holocaust Center North's archive. Why build a Holocaust archive now? How survivor relationships shaped archival practice, from personal papers to public responsibility. What a living archive means today. And I'm a great believer in archives. I've just been involved in a small Jewish community, Sheffield's community, archiving what has happened for future generations. It's crucial. Next week, Ivor will be hosting. That's Friday the 16th of January. You can see it on your screens at 10:30 for 10:45. Alessandro Bucci. And I invite you all to come back next weekend, next Friday, for another, what promises to be a remarkable speaker. Thank you, Robert. Wow, I don't know how to assess what you've shared with us, Professor Michael, because it is so huge. It's absolutely huge. And I had a question which was going to be, so what if Iran falls? But I think you more or less answered it, that actually waiting in the wings is Turkey. And Israel used to have good relationships with Turkey, as I recall, not so long ago. And that seems to have changed completely. But it's not for me to ask questions. I just want to come to some of the comments. Tom Griffiths, are you there? Because you've made a number of points. And if you're there and you can show your hand, maybe you'd like to speak them. Tom, are you there? Yeah, Tom, please make your comments because they're rich.
Okay. I hope my connection's good. It's not always strong, so tell me if it is okay. 2 points I just wanted to pick up. Thank you, Michael, for an encyclopedia of knowledge. It's difficult to pick up any points along the way, but I'll just pick up 2 briefly that I put in the chat. First, as you referenced to the Arab Spring, which was, all the enthusiasm about that 10, 15 years ago, and it's proved to be a bit of a dud, really. And I just wanted to draw the comparisons with the original reference to that term, which was the Prague Spring of 1968. when it was said, you know, socialism was going to emerge with a human face and we're all going to have flowers and sit there in between East and West. It never happened. Soviet tanks turned up and crushed Prague and Czechoslovakia within a few months. And I put that in because it's a reminder of the war in Ukraine, how Soviet tanks are still present on the edge of Europe, and there's connections between Russia and China and North Korea and America. I find it quite frightening sitting here in Britain, not only looking at the situation in Gaza, but Ukraine, about all these forces present on the edge of our lives and no way forward being there. So a comparison there. The other point was all your reference to Saladin, which is very pertinent because clearly Saladin is seen as a kind of exemplar amongst Arab forces. It's a great Arab leader who defied the West and defied the crusading forces. And the point I put in the chat is that Saladin wasn't fighting the Jews. He was fighting the Crusaders. And the original Crusaders, the medieval Crusaders, were killing Jews in large numbers across Europe and then in Jerusalem. And that's the fact that now Hamas and its allies see Israel as crusading force, which is interesting when the medieval Crusaders were killing Jews. My only concern with your comments about dismantling Hamas is, and I put it there, how can the idea, and I put it in the chat, how can the ideas which inspire the struggle against America, and the US for that matter, ever be dismantled? I have reservations over this dismantling. If they've been around for centuries and show no signs of disappearing, my concern is we're going to get in a forever conflict which will never be resolved, because how can you dismantle these ideas which have been around, rightly or wrongly, for centuries? Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Would you like to comment, Kobi?
Yes, I will begin with a general comment. I didn't refer to Ukraine, but there is a connection even between Ukraine and what is going here in the Middle East, because this is something that signals to the Russians how determined is America when it comes to its allies. And as long as they understand that America is not so determined when it comes to its allies, and by the way, this is not the first time. I would like to remind us what happened in 2019 when the Iranians and the Houthis launched missiles towards Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, and they destroyed 50% of the entire oil infrastructure of the Saudis, Aramco. And President Trump was there in 2019. There was no any response from the American side, and this was a huge, I would say, disappointment for the Saudis and for the entire region, at least for those in the region that consider themselves as allies of the United States. And this is a very, very significant signal to the other adversaries of the United States, be it China or be it Russia, how far America is willing to go in order to defend its allies. Okay, I'm not sure that the Russians are sure or convinced that Ukraine is considered by the Americans as an ally. I'm not sure about that. I think that if the Russians were sure about that, and if America did more, maybe they were more cautious. Now, with regard to your question about the disarmament of Hamas, we have to remember we have to clarify what do we mean by disarmament of Hamas, okay? Because people tend to be confused in this regard. People think that when we say disarmament of Hamas, dismantling Hamas, it means that we will reach to the last militant, the last RPG, or the last MK-47 of Hamas. No, this is not the intention. The idea of dismantling Hamas is the idea of assuring that Hamas will not be capable to rule or to continue ruling the territory and the population. It means that you have to dismantle very significant military capacities that they have. It doesn't mean that you have to dismantle all the military capacities. Look, there is Hamas also in the West Bank. And we are in a terror war in the West Bank even before October 7th. The campaign against the terror in the West Bank began in March 22. By the way, following two terror events that occurred in the state of Israel by two Israeli citizens. One in Beersheba, Bedouin from the Negev, and the other by two from Al-Fahim, near Hadera. And this ignited the West Bank, and Israel found itself since March 22 in a terror campaign in the West Bank that was intensified after October 7 because of October 7. But there is Hamas in the West Bank, but Hamas in the West Bank is not like Hamas in the Gaza Strip. Hamas in the West Bank is not capable to control not even a refugee camp there. Not talking about the entire Palestinian Authority territories. Because we are there, because we are mowing the grass all the time, because we have an intelligence and operational dominance there. And this is not the situation in the Gaza Strip. It was not the situation until October 7th, and unfortunately, it is not the situation yet. And even after we harmed severely Hamas and we destroyed most of their military capacities in the Gaza Strip, the military capacities and the governmental capacities that they still have in the Gaza Strip is far, far more substantial than what they have in the West Bank. So if you ask me, we have to shape a reality in the Gaza Strip that will be very similar to the reality that we know in the West Bank, and to create the conditions that Israel will be able to operate there militarily as we operate in the West Bank and in South Lebanon when it comes to Hezbollah. Okay, this is not the situation right now.
Thank you, Professor. I just want to touch, thank you, Tom, as well. I just want to touch on Michael's comment, Hamas has won the media war and to our cost in the diaspora. How on earth can we reverse this? People don't believe the threat in our midst. This is the ideological threat and the global picture, I'm sure. I also want to, just before you take that one on, Benjamin Tobin asks, Professor, how are you received at the university in Pontypridd, where there were once two shuls and a refuge for Jews? And Sharon has her hand up. So if you could answer fairly...
Can you repeat the second question?
It was about how are you received at university in Pontypridd in South Wales, where there were once two shuls and a refuge for Jews. So I'm throwing that one in. And Sharon, I have seen your hand up, but let's just see if we can get a concise answer from you, Professor, on the business about PR, if you like, and that sort of touches on the the situation in Pontypridd.
Yes, I will begin with the first question, the idea of ideology, propaganda, and this is much broader and deeper than that. We are talking about the cognitive war, and unfortunately, Hamas was very successful in its cognitive war. Israel failed in its cognitive war. I mean, the idea that Hamas succeeded to recruit the international media, international organizations, and to bring them to adapt Hamas narratives about the massive killing in the Gaza Strip of innocent people, okay? And the idea of starvation, the idea of committing
genocide,
committing war crimes, and so on and so forth. This is, first of all, a failure of the state of Israel, but this is in the very same time a very significant achievement of Hamas, and this is part of their strategy. We have to understand it. All the idea of cognitive war, all the idea of playing with the consciousness of people, all the idea of creating and shaping narratives and rooting them very deeply in the consciousness of the people by using international platforms, be it international media or international organizations. This is a profession. Okay, and they know the work, they know how to do that, and unfortunately, the vast majority of the international media just cooperated with them, and continue cooperating with them, and this is not the time to analyze why, but there are several reasons for that. The bottom line is that they provide, I mean the international media and international organizations, mainly the UN, which is the most corrupted and inefficient organization in the world. They provide Hamas with very useful and effective platforms that enable Hamas to echo, to amplify their narratives and to push Israel to the corner. And the idea that the Israeli prime minister and the Israeli defense minister and who knows how many others among Israelis are with I would say arrest warrants and that were issued by the ICC. It's something, and Hamas leaders, okay, have no responsibility. This is something that is insane. But ideology is very important. This is the generator. We have to understand this is the generator when it comes to Muslim communities, when it comes to religious belief. This is and the Palestinian society as well as Arab society, generally speaking, they are religious. By the way, there is no such a thing, secular people, okay, among Muslim communities, among Arabs. It is not like Judaism or Christianity. All of them are religious, different levels of religious people, but all of them are religious. And the Quran and I would say the mosque and the imams play a very significant roles in their
politics. Yeah. Do you want to just
with regard to the second question when it comes to
so it was how are you received at the university in Pontypridd where there were
So first of all, I got my appointment there 5 years ago or 6 years ago. It was long before, but I would say that at least based on my experience, this university is not so deeply rooted in the current, I would say, the current wave of criticism against Israel. It is true that in the last 2 years we hear more and more voices which are critical against Israel, but it is not like some other leading British universities or American universities from the Ivy League.
Yeah.
But it will reach to there as well. I have no doubt about it. It will reach to there as well.
Thank you. Sharon, you have your hand up. You need to unmute yourself. We're running out of time, so can you make it concise, please?
Two very short questions. One is, it says in the Torah, I don't know the exact words, but in every generation an enemy will rise against us. And so far, thank goodness, if it's God or whoever has helped destroy all these enemies. Do you think in any way radical Islam can be destroyed, or is it too spread in the world? And my second question is, if Iran is destroyed and Turkey takes over, they're part of NATO. How will that affect the whole situation?
They're big questions. I'm going to press you for a short answer if that's possible, because I just want to tackle another couple of comments and then we need to thank you. So
yes,
do your best. Do your best, Kobi.
I will begin with Turkey. First of all, Iran will not be destroyed. If there will be a significant change, it will be a change of the regime in Iran, and this will be a very positive change. You know, Bernard Lewis said, I would think 2 decades ago, that Iran will be Turkey and Turkey will be Iran. And he said more than 20 years ago that Turkey is much more dangerous than Iran, that the regime of the Ayatollahs will collapse eventually and Iran will return to the Western world as it used to be before. But this is not the situation with Turkey. And I think that he was right in this regard. Now, Turkey is part of NATO, right? It is true, but it doesn't mean that as a member of NATO, it doesn't make some very severe problems to other members of NATO in Europe. I would like to remind the Turkish behavior with regard to the Syrian refugees that they hold as hostages in Turkey, and they threatened Europe if they will not get money from Europe, they will open the gates and will enable the flow of Syrian refugees to Europe. I think that it is a problem. Turkey also bought the SA-400 from Russia against the rules of the regulations of NATO. So Turkey is a problematic player, and I think that as long as President Trump admires President Erdogan and says that he is, I would say, his best friend or something like that, it makes the problem even more problematic. Now, with regard to the first question about eradicating radicalism, it's something that goes back to the capacity of, I would say, the main players in the free civilization to cooperate together. First of all, to wake up and to understand and to adopt a very sober observation about the situation. And then to be able to cooperate and to understand that the radical Islam is a very severe threat on Europe, on its civilization, on its politics, on its identity. If they will not do that, they will face a much more radical I would say a more radical right in their countries, and they will find themselves in face of a very, very severe problems. And I think that if they will be sober enough in order to understand the essence of the problem, they will reach immediately to the conclusion that Israel is their best ally, and they have to improve the relations with Israel because Israel can help them in this regard.
Thank you. I'm going to read a couple of the comments that are in the chat, but I don't expect an answer because we're fast running out of time. And Dania, I don't mean to minimize your question. How do you explain and justify to us and the world the massive killing of the Palestinians in Gaza? How does that succeed in fighting the hegemonic Islam? I take the question, but we don't really have the time to answer it just now.
Can't we stay on a little bit just for those that want to?
Yes, okay. We can
and listen to what he's got to say. It's amazing. Anyone that wants to leave, ask them to leave.
Okay, I take that point. We can extend if Robert, if you're not running out of steam, extend for 5 minutes. Brian Ratner says, I understand the UK government is considering banning the Muslim Brotherhood. What countries in Europe have succeeded so far in this, and what strategies have been helpful in nudging governments to do so? By the way, I made an assumption that Professor Michael, you'd be prepared to stay on for another 5 minutes. It's the same. Okay. It's the same fee. You're not going to get extra.
No problem.
Would you like to comment on those two points?
First of all, I will comment very shortly, very briefly about the number of.
Actually, before you do, let me just remind people about next week, because if people are still wanting to go away and process all this, we have to let them leave at 12. Can I just put up again next week, From Living Memory to Living Archive, the Birth of Holocaust Center North's archive, Alessandra Bucchi, on Friday the 16th at the usual time of 10:30. Be there or be square. Thank you, Robert. I'm sorry to have interrupted you, Kobi. Just pick up on those questions.
Yes, it's okay. I would like to refer very briefly to the claim about the high numbers of the casualties, the fatalities in the Gaza Strip. And it is true that these are high numbers, but we have to understand the composition of the numbers, okay? First of all, we have to remember that Israel and the IDF took the utmost efforts in order to minimize the collateral damage. And there is no even a single military in the entire Western world that did things like that, be it in Iraq, Afghanistan, the Balkans, or in any other place. And there is, I would say, a sort of an average ratio of collateral damage, which means that how many innocent civilians were killed on each terrorist that you killed. Okay. Now, if you will go to the official web of the UN, you will find that the UN states that on the ground, the average ratio is 1 to 9, which means that on each terrorist that was killed, 9 innocent civilians were killed. Now, when it comes to the experience of Western militaries, be it in Iraq or in Afghanistan, there are disputes about a ratio of 1 to 5 or 1 to 7. I think that people have no idea what is the ratio that Israel has succeeded to reach to in the Gaza Strip. We are talking about a ratio of 1 to 1.7, okay, or 1 to 2. And John Spencer is not an Israeli, but he is the leading. But is the what is that?
Statistician.
Just a moment, please. Somebody's interfering me here. Just a moment. Sorry. And John Spencer is the leading expert in the is the leading expert in the world with regard to urban warfare. He's from the United States, from West Point, and Richard Kemp from the UK. And John Spencer said that the IDF set a golden standard with regard to the collateral damage, okay? Which means that this is the lowest ratio of collateral damage since ever. And this is something that we have to remember. Secondly, as I described before, we have to understand what is the Gaza Strip and what is the composition, what is the terrain of the Gaza Strip, and how the Gaza Strip terrain was used by Hamas for terror purposes. If Hamas uses hospitals and mosques and schools and clinics and cemeteries for terror purposes, okay, then we have to understand that there will be consequences to that. And according to the international law, these are legitimate military targets. And Israel took many, I would say, many efforts in order to minimize the collateral damage. And in many cases, Israel didn't attack hospitals and some other civilian facilities. By the way, even UNRWA, UN facilities, were used by Hamas as terror compounds, and in some cases, even with cooperation with UNRWA officials, okay, with UNRWA employees, that part of them even participated in the massacre of October 7th, actively participated. And we are talking about the UN, we are talking about UN agency, okay? Now, when it comes to the infrastructure of the tunnels, I explained before, we are talking about all the Gaza Strip is 365 square kilometers, 2.2 million people that live there. This is the most densely populated area in the world. Now, all the buildings, or almost all the buildings, all the infrastructures were connected to the tunnels, and they were used by the tunnels. And when it comes to the population itself, the population of the Gaza Strip, Hamas, didn't come from nowhere. We have to remember that Hamas was elected in the first and the last 3 elections in the Palestinian arena by the Palestinian people. And Hamas was supported before the attack by the Gazans, during the attack, and after the attack. And according to all the Palestinian polls, Hamas is still the most popular political movement or party in the Palestinian arena. Twice more than Fatah. 40% of the entire Palestinian population say in the polls that they will vote Hamas. And we began with 82% of the entire Palestinian population that supported the barbaric attack of October 7th. Now there is a decrease after 2 years. And now, fortunately, only 53% of the entire Palestinian population still support the massacre of October 7th. We have to understand this is the psyche of the population. This is the psychological infrastructure. And you know what is the best indication of the problem that we have? We have three Palestinian populations. We have the Gazans, we have the West Bankers, and we have the East Jerusalemites. 350,000 East Jerusalemites, Palestinians who live in East Jerusalem, and they hold an Israeli ID. They have all the civilian rights as any other Israeli citizen, beside two rights: to vote to the Israeli parliament, to the Knesset, and to hold an Israeli passport. They use a laissez-passer, okay? But they can vote to the municipality of Jerusalem. They can live whenever they want in Israel. They can have properties in Israel. They get social security from Israel, and they get healthcare from Israel. They work in Israel. And these Jerusalemites, in comparison to the West Bankers and the Gazans, are the most radicals among the Palestinians when it comes to support in the massacre of October 7, when it comes to support in Hamas, when it comes to the reluctancy to accept the right of the Jewish people for self-determination. I mean, if those who live among us and have all the rights, and by the way, when you ask them, what do you prefer, to go back to the Palestinian territories and to be under the control of the PA, or to remain as Israeli residents, the vast majority of them, more than 80%, prefer to live in Israel and to remain under the Israeli control.
Of course.
At the very same time, they don't have any problem to be the most radicals among the Palestinians. So, I mean, there are very few innocent people in the Gaza Strip that are not related to Hamas and cooperated with Hamas and gave their homes in order to keep even hostages in their homes. So I think that, yes, there were some problems, and in some occasions, things that should be done were done. These things should be investigated by the IDF. They are investigated by the IDF. People went to jail even, okay? There were soldiers who committed war crimes, as well as in any other war in the world. But we have to know what is the scale, what is the ratio in comparison. I mean, this is the idea of losing the context. This is the idea of not having a sort of a historical background and ability to compare to other urban warfares that were in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in the Balkan, you name it, okay? So
thank you.
I think that in this regard, with all the pain when it comes to the Palestinian society in Gaza, and I do feel sorry about them. And you know, sometimes I feel sorry about them more than they feel sorry about themselves.
Yeah. It's a good way to end on that. Look, there are other questions and there are other comments, but I think you've given us the most remarkable talk this morning, and your knowledge is matched by your passion, and we are tremendously privileged to have had you with us, Professor Michael. Really, there are other questions which lead me to say, would you come back and talk to us again soon? Let's see what the next 2 or 3 months bring.
It will be my pleasure.
Well, you've had over 100 people listening today, and judging from our stats, a lot more people are going to take the recording. And actually, you've gone well over the time, and I thank you for that. You've done it in a charming and very absorbable manner. I ask all our viewers that have left to show our appreciation for Professor Kobi Michael in the normal way. We wish you well. We wish you a happy new year. Shabbat Shalom, good Shabbos to everybody. I think this was a monumental way to start the year for Abraham Events, and that's down to you, Professor Michael. Thank you for your erudition, your passion, and your charm. We wish you well. We want to see you back again.